Tonight, still waiting. A huge swathe of southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales on alert ahead of the arrival of Cyclone Alfred. Yuma, good evening. I'm Adrienne Francis, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge others with connections to the lands of the ACT. This is ABC News. Also tonight, a cross-border police manhunt after a patrol car is stolen from officers in Bungendore. A teenager in court after allegedly trying to board a plane with a loaded shotgun. And after a month as Vice-Chancellor, Bill Shorten lays out his plans for the University of Canberra. Cyclone Alfred is bearing down on Australia's east coast, with the worst of the weather still to come. Alfred is the first tropical cyclone to make a direct hit on Brisbane and the Gold Coast in more than 50 years. The cyclone is predicted to make first contact with land as a Category 2 system before heading inland. The impact will be felt along a 600-kilometre stretch of the coast from Queensland's Double Island Point to Yamba in New South Wales, with intense rainfall, destructive wind gusts and wild seas. 4.5 million people live in the path of the storm. Life-threatening flash flooding is expected, and more than 80,000 homes are tonight without power. And up to 800 millimetres of rain is possible within the next 3 days. We have reporters across New South Wales and Queensland tonight. We begin our coverage with Mark Willisey in Brisbane.
It's a threat not seen here in a generation. Ferocious winds ripping massive trees from their roots on the Gold Coast. The consequences devastating, with homes crushed by falling branches. Tens of thousands are without power and fearing what's still to come.
Not looking forward to tonight because we've got windows all around.
Scott Maxwell was lucky to escape uninjured when a huge tree fell on his Currumbin home.
I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning with a loud thud and the whole house shook.
The savage conditions taking even experienced hands off guard.
I'm used to cyclones. I've come from Magnetic Island, North Queensland, so Category 5. I wasn't worried about Category 2. I should have been.
The Gold Coast's famous beaches, unrecognisable. Massive swells are gouging chunks out of the coastline, leaving a jagged wall of sand with a breathtaking drop.
We're all quiet. I think we're all in awe of what's happening right now.
Unbelievable what nature can do.
Structures now left exposed to the elements, and some hinterland roads are starting to go under. This lot will need a shower before they bunker down, potentially for a while.
It's possible that we're going to ask people to shelter for 24 to 36 hours.
One of the nation's most built-up regions is at the mercy of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. The storm's slow progress allowing for final walks and preparations in Brisbane this morning. After an agonising wait, most just want to see the back of it.
But now we're breathing deeply because the pause just adds a little bit more pressure.
We've both not been through anything like this before.
The power is probably the main concern.
City life has ground to a halt. The streets are mostly empty.
Humans rally in times of crisis, and people really have.
Potential projectiles have been corralled. Families are ready.
It's like you're waiting for a meal to come to the table and you're just sitting there waiting.
The Cyclone Alfred moves across the Moreton Bay Islands overnight. It's expected to weaken from a Category 2 to a Category 1 system before crossing the mainland tomorrow morning.
This will mean that destructive winds are unlikely for Brisbane itself, but damaging wind gusts to 120 kilometres per hour are expected.
While Alfred's slow pace has given southeast Queensland time to prepare, it comes with a sting in the tail. Authorities say it could take the tropical cyclone anywhere between 6 to 9 hours to cross the coast. In the process, it could dump life-threatening and dangerous flooding rains on low-lying areas. Rainfall totals for the event could reach 800 millimetres in some areas.
In this case, it is really large and slow moving, and that does represent the prospect of some significant rainfall.
Potentially exceed the levels we saw in the 2022 flood. And so if that is not a reason to take this seriously, I don't know what is.
Authorities expect to release water from the region's main dams in the coming days. Islands just off the coast are already being pounded. Kangaroos are fleeing. Hatchlings are off to a turbulent start.
But it's coming now, you can feel it's in the air.
It'll be a sleepless night for many, with more to come as the expected flood disaster unfolds. Mark Willisey, ABC News, Brisbane.
The damage from Cyclone Alfred is already visible on the New South Wales coast. Wild tides and storm surges are eroding some of the state's most popular beaches. Experts say it's to be expected, but the worst of the weather is yet to come.
With Cyclone Alfred on their doorstep, communities on the edge of the ocean are securing what they can.
And it's roaring, absolutely roaring. So I've tied it all up, made sure everything was slashed down, and yeah, it should be all right.
This is a serious issue for those communities, particularly low-lying communities close to the coast as well.
High tides and damaging surf are starting to erode Byron Bay's famed beaches.
When those waves have so much energy, that's when they actually need to lose some of their energy, and by that means they actually take that sand away from the beach.
So there has been coastal surges. There are still some considerable high tides that are occurring. A number of the beaches have been affected, but we're still very early in this cyclone hitting the sea.
As water levels rise, animals are also being displaced. This eel was rescued after washing into a gutter in Ballina.
You're a bit lost there, mate.
While a turtle found itself lost on the streets of Benora Point.
I'll help you out, get you back in the water, safe.
Several major flood warnings have been issued for rivers between Port Macquarie and Tweed Heads. Coastal communities like Ballina will be first in line for a battering when Alfred arrives. Sandwiched between rivers and the ocean, the risk that floods could clash with a storm surge means that homes like these are particularly vulnerable. Sam Ryder moved into his home on the Richmond River just 4 weeks ago.
Like, the attitude from most of the people in this area is pretty casual, so we'll see what happens. It could be bad. We put the sandbags out just to kind of stop the wake and whatnot. Like, you'll never keep water out completely.
Other locals aren't so relaxed.
If that water comes down from Lismore and that surge is still here, good night.
One more restless sleep before the cyclone's long-anticipated arrival. Sean Turritt-Goodwin, ABC News, Ballina.
Reporter Laura Lavelle is in Brisbane for us tonight, and Victoria Pengilly is in northern New South Wales. Laura, have conditions taken a turn for the worse where you are?
They certainly have, Adrienne. Weather here has really ramped up considerably over the past few hours in Brisbane. The winds are quite strong at the moment, and we know that the Gold Coast is currently being pounded by those dangerous wind gusts. Residents have been told to take shelter if they haven't yet already, and be prepared to stay indoors for up to 36 hours. Today, more than 50,000 people lost power. Many are still without, and no doubt more power will be cut to areas as tropical cyclone Alfred barrels onto the Queensland coast. Authorities say the following 24 hours are going to be difficult for those across southeast Queensland.
And Victoria, you're in Murwillumbah. How are things looking there?
Look, it's been a pretty wet and windy day here. The rain has been coming down pretty consistently. Much of the town lost power overnight, and some phone towers have also gone out, which is an eerie sign of what's to come. There has been some minor flooding in low-lying areas, and the Tweed River is currently sitting at about 3 metres, which is still at minor flooding levels and well below the peak of 6.5 metres seen back in 2022. The real concern, though, is if this rain continues to fall, the water could breach the riverbanks and put hundreds of businesses and homes right in the firing line all over again.
Victoria Pengilly in Murwillumbah and Laura Lavelle in Brisbane. Thank you both. With only hours till Tropical Cyclone Alfred makes landfall, there are some severe weather conditions to stay aware of. Here's what to expect in the coming days.
Well, before Cyclone Alfred makes landfall, wind gusts today recorded up to 120 kilometres per hour at Cape Byron. Peak waves off Brisbane climbed to nearly 17 metres yesterday, and more than 400 millimetres of rain has drenched Dorrigo in 48 hours. And the severe weather has been ongoing for most of the week, including more than 48 hours with peak waves exceeding 10 metres off Tweed Heads, and already 3 consecutive days with damaging wind gusts at Byron Bay. Tonight, Alfred is less than 100 kilometres offshore and is forecast to cross the Moreton Bay Islands overnight before reaching the mainland on Saturday. It's during this period when destructive gusts may occur just south of the eye on the coastal fringe, along with the highest threat of erosion when high tide occurs around 4 a.m. The wind and wave threat will gradually ease after landfall. However, for most regions, the worst impacts will arrive under Alfred's deluge of rain, hundreds of millimetres on Saturday alone, focused in on Brisbane, the Gold Coast and the Northern Rivers. And the latest modelling now has torrential falls persisting into Sunday, another 300 millimetres possible near the border, while heavy rain also spreads west and flooding is possible on the New South Wales northern slopes and ranges. The remnants of Alfred will finally shift south and spread heavy rain to Sydney by the time we hit Monday. By then, widespread flooding across both southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales.
Tom Saunders there, and coming up later this hour, a special edition of 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson.
For our cyclone coverage, I'll be joined by the Prime Minister, the Premier of Queensland, David Crisafulli, and our reporters on the ground.
To other news now, and a street in Canberra's inner north is in lockdown as part of a cross-border search for a man who stole a police patrol car in Bungendore earlier today. Our reporter Harry Frost is at the scene in O'Connor and joins me now. Harry, what happened earlier today?
Well, Adi, as you say, the siege behind me is just the latest in a series of events which started in the early hours of this morning. Police say that 2 New South Wales police officers interrupted a break-in at a cafe in Bungendore at about 2 o'clock this morning. They say they tried to arrest a man they found inside using a taser, but they say that that was ineffective. This man has somehow managed to get into their patrol car, and as he's driven off in that vehicle towards Canberra, one of the officers has fired his sidearm at the car, hitting it in the passenger side door. But that vehicle has continued on towards the ACT. A short time later, a man and a woman travelling in a white Kia SUV in Fyshwick were pulled over by that police vehicle. They say that they then had their car stolen. The woman, trying to escape from the scene, climbed into the abandoned police car and herself drove for a short distance before she crashed, and then she was arrested. She was later released, though, without charge. This afternoon, police have surrounded a home here in Lobelia Street in O'Connor, where that siege, I say, is still underway.
What's happening now where you are in O'Connor, Harry?
Yeah, so there's officers who have blocked off the street. There's heavily armed officers surrounding the house, and negotiators are using a loudspeaker to urge the occupants of the house, particularly a man, to give themselves up. They're telling him that they've been here for several hours and they won't be leaving until he's under arrest. Adi?
Harry Frost reporting from O'Connor, thank you. Victorian police have charged a teenager who allegedly breached a fence at Victoria's second airport before attempting to board a flight armed with a shotgun. The 17-year-old was tackled to the ground and detained by a group of passengers and crew yesterday on a Jetstar flight bound for Sydney at Avalon Airport near Geelong. Police allege the teenager entered the airport through a hole in a security fence. He's facing charges including taking control of an aircraft. It's alleged he entered the plane with a gun and falsely claimed he had a bomb. Cyclone Alfred has scuppered the Prime Minister's plans to call the federal election for April 12. Here's National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman.
The Prime Minister was planning to call the election on Sunday for April 12, but with the cyclone yet to make landfall, he's confirmed to the ABC he'll wait. An April election would have enabled the Prime Minister to avoid a budget and the disruption of campaigning through Easter, Anzac Day and school holidays. But it's not to be. Parliament is now set to return on March 25 for the Treasurer's fourth budget, with an election to follow in May.
I have no intention of doing anything that distracts from what we need to do. And what we need to do is to look after each other at this difficult time.
At this point, only one thing's for sure: the election has to be held by May 17.
Jane Norman at Parliament House. Just over a month into his job running the University of Canberra, Bill Shorten has set a goal to drag its troubled budget out of the red and into the black next year. The UC Vice-Chancellor has also assured staff he doesn't see any need for more compulsory redundancies once the current wave of layoffs ends. For Stateline, Greg Jennett spoke to Vice-Chancellor Shorten in his office on campus.
Bill Shorten, welcome to Stateline. I acknowledge it's still early days for you in this new role, but can you elaborate for us a little on the rejuvenation project that you've flagged here? Any early breakthroughs?
It's early days. It's a fantastic job. I'm very privileged to work at the University of Canberra with such amazing staff and students. I think the University of Canberra's got a bright future. It's doing a lot of impactful research and some really quality teaching. So I think rejuvenation's very much on the cards.
Let's talk about financial woes. You've explained recently, publicly, that there was a $30 million deficit caused in large measure by overestimations of enrolments in 2024. What are your estimates for this year, and are they in line with enrolments so far?
Well, first of all, we've had good growth where the census figures were signed off last Friday. I haven't seen the final figures, but the university's growing, which is good. This year round, I think our forecasts of growth will be met. We operate on a financial year, so how we go in financial year 2025, I'll let you know next year. But the signs are positive. Whether or not we bridge the whole operating deficit in 1 year, that's a big call, but I'm confident that we will be significantly improved on the financial outcomes from last year.
Right, so something considerably less than 30 million.
That's right.
And by when would you aim to turn that into the positive?
I'd like us to be positive sometime in 2026. Our balance sheet's fine, but I want to make sure that we're getting close to a surplus in the next 12 to 18 months, perhaps 24.
Okay, so just update us on the redundancy program. The total number on the voluntary side, I think, is 136. That's where the heavy lifting is being done. Where are you up to against that number?
The process, which was started late last year, has seen 120 professional staff positions disestablished. In other words, we're going to run leaner, and about 70 academic staff. We'll see if that goes far enough. I don't want to see any more forced redundancies. We're getting, I think, to the place we need to be to have a sustainable ongoing budget, but there's still a little bit more to come, and we're trying to do that as promptly but as fairly as we can.
I know you've said in relation to the previous administration you don't want to be the University of Canberra's historian, but I'm sure you've been briefed on aspects of it that have not been publicly explained, like the decision to pay out that former Vice-Chancellor Nixon in circumstances where that may not have been legally necessary. We don't know the answer to that. Do you commit to giving a public account of what went on in that era at some stage when your knowledge is well established?
Well, first of all, since I've come in, I've worked closely with the University Council. They do enjoy my confidence. I can't speak to everything that's happened or whatever negotiations or confidential matters were dealt with before my time. You know, as we both know, I'm a veteran of politics, and sometimes incoming governments will try and blame their predecessors for all the woes of the world. I don't want to do that here. I think people want me to be a positive leader, and that's what I'll do.
I understand that. Is your team cooperating fully with the ACT Integrity Commission on any of these matters?
Well, when it comes to any of our governance reviews, I know that our team are being very professional. We're launching our own corporate governance review. We've got Professor Ian Chubb, who's just about run everything to do with universities in Australia. I want to do my own due diligence to make sure that everything is operating as it should be.
Bill, let's broaden out our conversation a little. None of us can outrun our past, and there is a significant electoral event coming up. I'm wondering if you've transferred your ALP membership to a Canberra branch, whether you intend to participate in any sense in the campaign, be that at booths or with candidates.
Well, I'm a life member of the Labor Party, and there's only one way I could leave of that. No, my job here is to represent the University of Canberra. That's my new team. That's who I've picked.
What about being an advocate for Canberrans, more broadly defined? Well away from the gates of this campus, will you speak up for Canberra, which, let's face it, is going to become an issue in this election campaign too?
Yes, well, that's a slightly different question. But when it comes to speaking up for Canberra, the test I will apply is what's in the best interest of students, staff and their families and the Canberra community. So I will use my role within the life of Canberra as the Vice-Chancellor of Canberra's University. If Canberrans aren't getting a fair deal, or if our students or their families are not getting a fair deal, you'll hear more from me, because I might be Canberra's newest recruit, but I'm certainly one of its most enthusiastic supporters.
Spoken a bit like a potential Chief Minister.
Oh my God, no.
You're slowly settling into this job. It is, as we acknowledged at the outset, early days, but we hope to stay in touch regularly. Bill Shorten, thank you. I look forward to it.
Ukraine's president says he will send negotiators to Saudi Arabia for talks with US officials after the White House suspended crucial military aid. Volodymyr Zelensky has met EU leaders who've unanimously agreed to boost defence spending to support Kyiv in its fight against Russia. Europe correspondent Zoe Ford reports from Brussels.
A warm welcome in the middle of a funding freeze. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky arrives in Brussels after a gruelling week, thanking European Union leaders for their support.
You made a strong signal to Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian warriors, to civilians, to all our families, and it's great that we are not alone.
The 27 EU countries unanimously backed plans to free up billions of dollars for defence following marathon talks, just days after the United States paused funding and support for Kyiv.
We are coming out of this European Council very determined to ensure Europe's security and to act with the scale, the speed and the resolve that this situation demands.
The Ukrainian president has also confirmed he'll send negotiators to Saudi Arabia next week for talks with US officials. He's vowing to work constructively with the Trump administration.
Ukraine wants to make a deal because I don't think they have a choice. I also think that Russia wants to make a deal because in a certain different way that only I know. They have no choice either.
26 of the 27 EU leaders at this summit voiced their support for Kyiv, insisting there can be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine and promising to continue the supply of aid. There wasn't consensus because, as expected, Hungary's Viktor Orban refused to join them. He supports Donald Trump's plan for direct talks with Moscow.
The policy of President Trump in that respect is more than right.
Meanwhile, Russian forces are continuing to advance through Ukraine's Donetsk region, shelling the city of Kramatorsk and claiming they've captured another village. Ukraine putting out fires one battle at a time. Zoe Ford, ABC News.
Pope Francis has thanked well-wishers in an audio message he recorded in hospital. It's after doctors confirmed his condition has remained stable for a third day.
The message came as a surprise to well-wishers who had gathered for a nightly prayer service for Pope Francis here at St Peter's Square. The message, which was recorded in Spanish by the 88-year-old pontiff earlier in the day, was played to the crowd and was met with applause. In the message, Pope Francis thanked those that had been praying for his recovery, and he said that he is with them. He also wished blessings upon them. This is the first time that the pontiff's voice has been heard since he entered Rome's Gemelli Hospital 3 weeks ago. He still hasn't been seen in public. In its latest medical update, the Vatican said that his condition has stabilised. That's after he suffered 2 respiratory crises earlier this week. He was initially admitted to hospital with bronchitis, but is now known to be battling pneumonia in both of his lungs. His doctors have told us not to expect daily medical updates, which we've been receiving up until now. That's because his condition has been stable for a number of days and they no longer deem a running commentary of his treatment necessary. Despite these seemingly positive signs, however, the Vatican says that his prognosis is still guarded, which means that they're not confident that he's out of danger yet.
Michelle Rimmer in Rome. US President Donald Trump has paused nearly all tariffs imposed on Mexico and Canada until next month. The reversal comes just 2 days after Mr Trump imposed a 25% tax on America's two closest trading partners. Mexico has welcomed the move and Canada has postponed some of its tariffs against the US until early April. Mr Trump's tariff plans have rattled Wall Street and alarmed American consumers. To finance now, and it was another bruising day for markets. The Australian share market fell to a new 6-month low. Here's David Chow.
Well, Donald Trump's policy announcements are kind of like turning on and turning off a light switch. The US president now wants to delay his 25% tariffs on most Mexican goods and some Canadian imports for about a month. And that's on top of yesterday's decision to give car makers a 1-month exemption from those tariffs. But investors are just over it. All that uncertainty and the constant backflipping, that led to the local share market falling by a pretty steep 1.8% today, with tech, banking and healthcare among the worst performing stocks. And when you zoom out, you can see the ASX is now at its lowest level in 6 months. Overseas, things were looking pretty ugly for Wall Street and the FTSE as well, though Chinese markets bucked the trend. Now, you can really see the pessimism on Wall Street's tech index. The Nasdaq is down 10% from its record high, so it's officially a correction. But that's nothing compared to Tesla, which has lost half its value in 3 months. Its EV sales have been falling quite sharply these past few months in Australia, Europe and even California, where its headquarters used to be. Although Elon Musk's tilt towards right-wing politics has cost him billions, don't worry, he's doing all right. Meanwhile, gold is down slightly, oil prices are near a 3-year low, and the Aussie dollar has slipped to 63 US cents. But it's nothing quite as dramatic as Bitcoin. The original cryptocurrency jumped when President Trump signed an executive order to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But it quickly fell again when people found out this reserve will be funded exclusively by Bitcoin that US authorities have already seized from criminals. So it seems taxpayers won't be footing the bill. And that's finance.
In the NRL, the Brisbane Broncos have made a statement in round 1 of the NRL with a record-breaking win over the Roosters at Sydney Football Stadium last night. Despite conceding the first try, the Broncos were dominant, running in 9 tries in their first game under new head coach Michael Maguire, including a second-half hat-trick to winger Selwyn Cobo. The already injury-plagued Roosters will be without enforcer Victor Radley next week after he left the field in the first half with a concussion. The 50 points to 14 win is the Broncos' biggest ever over the Sydney side.
We've got to get back to work and keep building the combinations. I mean, those things come off the work that they've done, but the combinations are going to continue to grow. So, yeah, I'm excited about that.
To the weather now and your sunrise observations from Liz of Garran over Lake Burley Griffin with some handsome pelicans enjoying the conditions. And Craig of O'Connor shared his sunrise view from Mount Majura. Thank you both. After a low of 10 degrees north side and 13 in the valley, it tried to rain this afternoon, but only light drops were observed across parts of the territory. And with partly cloudy conditions, we reached a top of 26 degrees in the valley. Around the capital, 7 millimetres of rain was recorded in the gauge at Nowra, with a top of 23 degrees and 2 millimetres of rain for Jarvis Bay. Inland, Goulburn got to a top of 22 today and Cooma 23. Across the nation, as we saw earlier, southeast Queensland received heavy rains and winds. Townsville recorded a top of 33 degrees and Brisbane 30. It was also wet over Sydney with a top of 27. The satellite shows cloud with tropical cyclone Alfred driving the windy rain over southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales. Cloud over remaining coastal New South Wales in an onshore flow is bringing showers. A cloud band over far west of Western Australia ahead of an approaching front is bringing the odd shower, while cloud in the tropics is bringing storms. Tomorrow, more rain and winds for Queensland, 27 degrees and showers for Sydney, sunshine for Melbourne and 32. Around the capital region, it's looking like a wet one for parts of the coast, including Nowra and Batemans Bay. Inland Yass Valley can expect a top of 28 degrees and partly cloudy conditions. Sunshine across the high country with 19, the top for Thredbo. After a low of 11 degrees north side and 12 in the valley, Canberra can expect a cloudy top of 26 degrees tomorrow with the slight chance of a shower. The sun will rise at 6:52 a.m. and set at 7:36 p.m. Looking ahead, partly cloudy conditions and 27 on Monday, a possible shower and 25 on Tuesday, cloudy and 27 on Wednesday, partly cloudy and 30 on Tuesday, and sunny and 32 on Friday. And that's ABC News for this Friday night. 7:30 is next with special coverage of Cyclone Alfred, and News Breakfast starts at the earlier time of 5 a.m. tomorrow. But from me, Adrienne Francis, thanks for your company. Yara, good night.